I typically try to stay optimistic when it comes to content that I make and the hot takes that I put out online. I've been talking about the gaming industry on YouTube for more than 10 years, and it's easy to focus on the negative side of everything. No matter when you're looking, the gaming industry can always look pretty bleak depending on how optimistic of a person you are, but looking back on the last week of news coming out of the Xbox camp, it's hard to find any way to flip anything into a positive perspective on the future of the platform. We've all seen the bad news in headlines, but 2024 has brought a massive wave of layoffs to the gaming industry. In fact, over at Kotaku, they kept track of everything, and as of February, there were over 8,800 gaming industry layoffs. We are now in May. Can you imagine how much bigger that number's gotten? And Xbox just pulled the trigger on closing 3 more studios entirely and rolling a 4th up into another team. Let me reiterate that. They aren't cutting some of the staff, they aren't selling the studios to another entity or exploring any other option to keep them around. 3 studios are just simply gone. And these are some of Xbox's more well-known studios. 2 teams, AlphaDog and Roundhouse, had worked on smaller games under the Bethesda umbrella. AlphaDog was most recently known for the recent mobile game Mighty Doom. It was okay. And then Roundhouse Studios mostly existed as a support studio that bopped around to a handful of projects until they worked on Redfall alongside Arcane Austin. AlphaDog just got the axe, and Roundhouse Studios is going to be folded into the ZeniMax Online team to help support development on Elder Scrolls Online. So if anything, it sounds like they're going to be getting a more permanent home for that support work. But then we've got the big cuts. Arcane Austin, the studio behind Dishonored, Prey, and Redfall, is shutting down entirely. And if you went up to any non-tuned-in gamer and said, hey, the team behind Redfall is shutting down, they probably wouldn't be shocked. The game was a commercial and critical flop for both Arcane and for Xbox, and any future content, updates, and DLC have been canceled entirely. People are getting refunds, it's over. But zooming out and looking at the bigger picture, Arcane Austin is one of the core teams responsible for Dishonored. That's arguably one of the most influential games of the last decade. Prey is a game that continually gets tons of praise as one of the best immersive sims that has ever come out. Admittedly, there were some reports that a significant number of the core staff that had made those successful projects happen left the company when work really started on Redfall and the execs started pushing for more always-on live service stuff. But that studio pedigree and the reputation was still alive and well even after Redfall landed with a thud. People are wanting Dishonored 3. And they had been pitching it. The real shocker of this whole week came with the shuttering of Tango Gameworks, the studio that made Hi-Fi Rush, which is arguably Xbox's most successful new IP that's come out of this entire generation. In fact, it's one of the only ones. And this tweet from Aaron Greenberg of Microsoft keeps floating around in these conversations, where he said that the game had exceeded every expectation that Xbox had for the Shadow drop at the start of 2023. In fact, the game was so good that Xbox chose to bring it to PlayStation 5 and do a physical release with limited run. That's still happening, by the way. So it would make perfect sense that while all of this momentum is popped up for a new series to go ahead and just shut down the studio making it, just as they're pitching ideas for a sequel to it. Beyond Hi-Fi Rush, Tango Gameworks was known for The Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo, a set of games that tried new things and took some risks that ultimately paid off in terms of quality in the final product. Now, were these record-breaking smash hits? No, but Tango had established an identity that was totally rooted in creative freedom, where they were making interesting ideas come to life through new high-quality video games. Ghostwire Tokyo remains one of my favorite games that I've played this generation. It's eclectic and weird, the gameplay is familiar but experiments in interesting ways, and it's got a fantastic aesthetic. It's just a good video game. That can be said for any of these things that Tango had worked on. In fact, Hi-Fi Rush took home multiple awards last year. So you'd think that Microsoft would want more of that, right? They do, and they reiterated that right after they let go of a ton of developers making award-winning stuff. Matt Booty had the audacity to hold an all-hands with Bethesda after these studio consolidations and closures to share that they, quote, need smaller games that give us prestige and awards. Matt, I hate to break it to you, but if you're looking for smaller award-winning games, Tango was a team that had the passion and talent to crank those out. But Booty wasn't done there. He also shared why these cuts were being made in the first place. He said, and I quote, "These changes are grounded in prioritizing high-impact titles and further investing in Bethesda's portfolio of blockbuster games, and that they're doubling down on the games that are, quote, best positioned for success." All of these comments were shared during the Bethesda Town Hall, so they're directed at Bethesda employees first and foremost, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is where Microsoft as a whole is leaning with their gaming division. Why focus on creating smaller games, even if there's big talk about being the gaming equivalent of an innovative think tank, when you can just pump out the larger hits that people have come to expect and drive more sales than any Hi-Fi Rush 2 would? And we've seen a ton of other comments from a ton of other execs, and Bloomberg had this interview with Sarah Bond, the president of Xbox, where she danced around giving a direct answer to a hard-hitting question about these studio shutdowns. If you want a general recap of the whole situation, I cannot recommend SkillUp's video enough. It's fantastic, even if the topic we're all talking about is not. But beyond the general shittiness around shutting down 3 studios and dissolving another one into a larger team, Xbox's problem is the same exact issue that they've had for years. It's communication, internally and externally. For this entire generation, Xbox has talked big talk about growing Game Pass, giving funding to unique concepts and projects, and partnering with developers and third-party publishers to nurture games and drive industry innovation. They've continued the Idea at Xbox program, tried to find new ways to spotlight developers, and have continued to bring smaller games into Game Pass. But if subscription growth is stalling out, it's only a matter of time before people at the very top, giving the financial reports a hard look, come crack down on Phil for the side quest that he's gone on to care for small developers and nurture new ideas. Xbox's problem is the same problem that any massive publicly traded company has to deal with every single day. They all have to answer to the shareholders and keep driving revenue. The decision to acquire Activision Blizzard and all of the massive games that came with it wasn't driven by somebody really liking Spyro. It was driven by money, and it worked. Xbox revenue was up 62% last quarter, with new income from Activision Blizzard selling Call of Duty skins and Candy Crush Lives accounting for 61% of that. When you remove them from the equation entirely, Xbox is stagnant at best and declining rapidly at worst. Even if people within the company are trying to nurture the smaller side of the industry, which I genuinely think Phil Spencer and his core team are trying to do, the execs at the top are focused on generating income, and they're only going to play nice with these programs when the money is looking good. Now, nobody can know the future, and the Xbox community's perception of this company changes every other week. 2024 has honestly been an emotional roller coaster. We've gone from freaking out about Xbox games coming to PlayStation, to hype around the summer showcase, and now to mass closures that just don't make sense from the outside looking in as a fan. Personally, all of these moves have left me with a pretty grim outlook on the future of Xbox. Now, I don't think the company is going anywhere or that the platform is going to be going away entirely, because if you look past the current PR nightmare of conflicting executive statements that they're dealing with, the company is still in a stronger standing than they ever were at any point during the Xbox One generation. Instead, I think Microsoft is just following the money on this one, because there were general fears about them becoming a third-party publisher when all of these games started going to other platforms, and that's because they are a third-party publisher more than ever before. They're going to be putting out all of their games, Sea of Thieves, Hellblade 2, Gears of War, Halo, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Diablo, whatever they've got, on platforms where it makes the most sense and the most money. That might be Xbox, that might be any platform that will host them. It'll all depend on the game in a case-by-case situation. That I do believe. But as time goes on, if Xbox continues to struggle to drive change in that bottom line outside of the Activision Blizzard camp, the powers that be of Microsoft are going to be making some changes and push for the games that are sure to drive revenue instead of taking risk on things that could, even if those risks end up being some of the most creative and exciting ideas they've had in years. But I'd love to hear what you're thinking right now. Where's your head at with all these big changes going on at Xbox? Does it feel like the beginning of the end, or are you still trying to stay optimistic? Because if you are, good on you. That is a challenge. And of course, if you're new here and you enjoy this type of content and these conversations, hit that subscribe button for videos like this every week and gaming news shorts throughout the week to keep you in the loop. And hopefully I'll be back next week with a happier video, because this is not a great topic that I enjoy discussing, but it's important to call this stuff out because it's a bad situation.